Here are 5 things that you might not have realized are helping your child learn to read. Hi, I'm Jen, and my job is to help you help your child to read at home. Today, we're going to be talking about a few things that have an impact on your child's reading ability. These are all really easy things to do that you might already be doing and not have even realized are helping your child massively. These are things you can do no matter what stage of reading your child is at. So whether they are 1.5 and you've not even dreamed of teaching letters to them yet, some of these things you can absolutely be doing to set them up for success in the future. Or your child might be a little bit older. They might be more confident readers. They might know several sounds, but they might be struggling with putting longer words together, for example. These are still things that it's really, really good to do at home to help build up their confidence, build up those foundations of reading, those skills that we need for reading to make them more confident, happy readers. So let's jump right in with number 1, nursery rhymes. Nursery rhymes give your child so much more than just a bit of entertainment. If you've ever attended one of my masterclasses or you've been following me for a while, you'll know how much I love nursery rhymes, how important I know they are for supporting reading, and you'll have heard me waffle on about it far too much, I'm sure. But they are so valuable for teaching reading skills, from teaching rhythm and basic vocabulary to younger kids, to teaching sentence structure, rhyming words, alliteration to older kids. By teaching those things, you are helping your child recognize patterns within words, which will help them read more words more quickly as they start to do so. In fact, there's a statistic that shows that children who know roughly 8 nursery rhymes by the time that they are 4 will be much more confident and fluent readers by the time that they are 8 than their peers who do not know as many nursery rhymes. As I said, nursery rhymes help with rhythm, with sentence structure, with syllables, with sounds in words, with word patterns, and so much more. So if you're singing a few nursery rhymes to your child at home, you are absolutely setting them up for success. You can extend this and challenge this a bit further by trying to link nursery rhymes to different parts of the day. Like if it's raining, singing songs like "Rain, Rain, Go Away" will help your child become more aware of their surroundings, build their comprehension, and help them remember that nursery rhyme a bit more solidly too. Next up, we're talking about memory games. When your child is learning to read, there is so much information that they have to retain, from recognizing letters, matching them to sounds, holding all those sounds in their heads, blending those sounds together, putting them into words that they recognize, words that they remember, and then finally putting it all into a sentence so that they can make sense of it. Your child's memory is having to work so incredibly hard. So it's understandable that if your child has a good memory, they will find reading easier in general. This becomes particularly obvious if your child is recognizing all the sounds in a word, but is struggling to remember them when they then say them back to you. Again, that's probably difficulty with memory. So we want to be doing things that will build up our child's memory, make it easier for them to remember things so that reading becomes easier. There are several very simple games that you can play with this, like the shopping carts game, where you start with a word, your child has to add on another word, and it goes back and forward. Like, I'm going to the shops and I'm going to buy some bread. Then your child says, I'm going to the shops and I'm going to buy some bread and some milk. I'm going to the shops and I'm going to buy some bread, some milk, and some oranges. And you carry on like that. By doing that, you're helping your child remember a sequence of words, which is exactly the same as if they're remembering a sequence of sounds for reading. Other things you can do is simply ask them to recall things that happened in their day in order. How did you get dressed this morning? First, I put on my socks, and then I put on my shirt. Things like that will help them remember and recall things in order to help them with their reading. Number 3 is communication. This one might seem obvious, but in order for your child to be a strong reader, they have to be able to speak and understand too. The more words your child recognizes, the more able they will be to work out what word they're reading, to understand new words in a sentence in context, and just generally to understand the sentence that they're reading. Communication is fantastic for helping your child shift from learning to read to reading to learn, where they're getting a lot more out of what they're reading and understanding it too. The wonderful thing is building your child's communication skills is as easy as it sounds. Simply talking to them will build their communication skills. Equally, things like narrating your life, where you talk about what you're doing as you're doing it. I'm going to the fridge. I've got some carrots. I'm going to chop up the carrots. All of that is teaching your child new vocabulary or solidifying old vocabulary. They're understanding sentence structure. They're retaining those sounds, those words in their head, and they're doing so in context so that they can try and use them as well. All of that's building up their communication skills, but otherwise getting them to talk about what they've done that day, either with really specific questions. If your child is someone who finds this hard, try asking questions like, what was your favorite subject today? Or what game did you play at lunchtime? Which will encourage them to think about a shorter period of time. They're not having to try and put so much information into one thing. If you start with one word answers, fantastic. You can build up to longer sentences and longer explanations over time. In a similar way, the final tip I'm going to give you is to give your child two options and get them to explain why. This is great because, again, you can adapt it for any age. If your child is 1, for example, you can show them the two options and they can just point or take whichever one they want. They don't even have to be able to speak that word at that point. As your child gets older, not only can they say what option they want, but also explain a bit more about why. For example, if you say, would you like an apple or an orange? When your child is very young and they don't have much speech, they might just take the apple. When your child is older, they might say apple. You can always get them to say apple, please, which would be 2 words in a sentence. Brilliant. As they get older, even older, you can say, why would you rather have an apple? And they can say apple, please, because it's sweeter, and so on and so forth. So it could even be, I would like an apple, please, because I like how crunchy it is and I don't like that the orange is squishy. Over time, you've built up their communication. You've got them explaining their viewpoint, developing their own opinions. And again, like with language, you are helping them to understand more about the world and explain their viewpoint as well, which is absolutely setting them up for success when it comes to reading too, because they have a broader vocabulary, they have a broader understanding, and they can absolutely utilize that when reading too. Next up, number 4, we're talking about listening skills. Now, this one might sound a bit rogue, as when we're reading as adults, we tend to read in our head. We don't need ears to be able to read. But actually, when our kids are young, listening is one of the most important skills. Kids don't read in their heads until they become really confident readers. In fact, there are several children I know in year 4 who are still not reading in their heads because they're just not particularly confident yet. Reading out loud is a vital step in that learning to read journey, and listening plays a huge part. When kids first start learning to read, they need to be able to sound out every single word, listen for it, hear it, retain it with that memory that we talked about, and then manipulate it to put it together. This all relies on their ability to listen. Not only that, but listening again helps to build that comprehension skill we talked about in communication, helping them understand what they hear, helping them understand later on what they've read. Playing games like Simon Says is fantastic for developing listening skills, because your child is not only listening for whether or not you've said Simon Says, but is also listening for the instruction and following the instruction afterwards. But equally, it is just as useful to get your child to pause for 30 seconds, listen to the world around them, and then tell you what they heard. That is building their listening skills just as strongly as playing games like Simon Says. The reason I love things like pausing for a second to listen is because you can get so much out of it. First off, your child is having to identify what they've heard, where it comes from. They've got that situational awareness. It helps them build up their awareness of the world. It helps them feel more secure in the world because they know what that sound is and where it's coming from. But second, if you can get your child to mimic that sound, like I can hear a car, it went vroom, you are helping them control sounds in their voice, which will help them so much when they get to later stages of reading and they have to put trickier sounds together. By getting them to mimic, you are not just helping them with their listening, but with their vocal control as well. And finally, number 5 is phonemic awareness. Okay, so this one kind of sort of follows on from the last one, but it is the most important part of learning to read. I'll definitely be going into more of a detailed breakdown on what phonemic awareness is, how your child can develop it, and every single step along the way in a later video, because it is something that I'm so incredibly passionate about. I love talking about phonemic awareness. It is so important to reading, and it's something that gets overlooked so often. So I will definitely be doing a deep dive on that in a later video. But ultimately, it's the ability to hear sounds and words and to blend them together. Building your child's phonemic awareness will give them such a head start when it comes to reading. If your child has not done any reading at all, not learned any letters, building their phonemic awareness will mean that once they start learning letters, they can just put them together like that. It becomes so easy. If your child hasn't even started learning letters yet, if you're building up their phonemic awareness, by the time they learn letters, by the time they implement the knowledge part of reading, they already have that skill. They can already blend those words together. It won't take them more than a second, and they will have a massive jump forward in their ability to read. Equally, if your child has already started learning to read, but is struggling to put those sounds together, their issue is around phonemic awareness. We need to be building that up more. And even further on, something that I see all the time in year 1 is children who were confident readers in reception, where they're only putting 3 sounds together. But in year 1, they've hit adjacent consonants, which is 2 consonant sounds together, like ul in clap. They are struggling to put those sounds together because their phonemic awareness just isn't strong enough. And even further on, adding in suffixes, so word endings or multisyllabic words, children who struggle with that, again, it all comes down to phonemic awareness. So the more we can build that phonemic awareness earlier on, the better it is for our kids, the more confident they will become. How can we do this? How can we implement this most important part of learning to read? Simply by breaking the words down into their individual sounds and saying them to our kids. It is as simple as that. So starting at the very basic level, if you have a child who is very, very young or hasn't started doing any oral blending at all, saying things like, please, can you get your k up? There, you've sounded out the words, you've given them the sounds, and then you've blended it together for your child. So in their heads, they've heard the 3 sounds and they've put them together. You've done the work for them. They've just got it. Fantastic. That is the first level. As your child becomes more confident with this, you can take it up to the next level where you go, please, can you get your s, o, s, and then we can go. So this time you've given them the sounds, but you haven't blended them together. If your child is becoming more confident in phonemic awareness, they've put those sounds in their head, just like they did with up, cup, and then their brain has automatically blended them together. So it's become s, o, s, and their brain has said socks. So again, you're helping them with that next step. Essentially, you're giving them the stepping stones to helping them become more confident readers. And if they are really confident with their phonemic awareness, they will have an incredible groundwork to build upon. So there are 5 things that will be a huge help to your child as they learn to read that you may or may not have known about. How many of these things were you already doing? Were there any that you didn't know about or that were new to you? I would love to hear your answers in the comments below. Please let me know. And if you have any questions, absolutely ask them below as well. I will do my best to make videos to support you guys, however that works for you. If you've made it to the end of the video, thank you so much for sticking around. If you'd like to watch my newest video on this channel, please click here and maybe consider hitting the subscribe button. But otherwise, I hope you have a wonderful day and I'll see you next time.